Hi, good day. This is Sandeep from Indian Weekender, and as a part of our Verdict 2017, where we are covering elections, today we are going to speak about immigration policy, which is definitely a major policy for a lot of us in the Kiwi Indian community. And to know more about what's happening in the immigration policy and what each party is promising in these elections, we are going to speak to Arunima Dhingra. Hi, Arunima. How are you today?
Hi, good. Thank you very much, Sandeep.
Great. So you must be pretty busy these days, isn't it, with immigration all over in the news?
Yes, it is busy, and I wouldn't say that it's busy for all the good reasons. We're doing a lot of talking and a lot of clarification about what seems to be a lot of belief led by rumors in the industry. So we are busy, but I think unfortunately not for all the good reasons. We have been busy, and I think this is probably the time to tell the general public what the actual facts are.
Sure. So just quickly, a quick overview of what each party, and when I say each party, we are talking about National and Labour, which we believe right now, as polls are suggesting, that they would be the major party in this election. Right. So National Party are making immigration quite a tough task here in New Zealand. And compared to that, the Labour Party is already making a huge noise that the record level of net immigration is responsible for a lot of infrastructural woes, saying that probably they will be cutting down immigration in the league of 20 to 30,000 numbers. So the major concern is for our international students, especially from India, and the numbers is already going down. What we want to do is talk about some key features for international students and their pathway to residency offered by both parties, National and Labour.
I think before I get on to that, from a practitioner's point of view, someone who sort of interacts with these changes on a daily basis, it's quite important to put a little bit of perspective around what's happening. So I've been practicing in immigration as an immigration advisor for a very, very long time. And
that is how many years?
Well, we're touching about 14 years
14
now.
years.
So, yeah,
so that means that you bring experience from both last 9 years of national government and previous maybe around 6 years of Labour government as
absolutely.
well.
I mean, licensing only started in 2009. Prior to that, there was no licensed advisors. So I was one of the first ones to get a license. So technically, that's when legally we call ourselves licensed advisor. So from memory, since mid 2000s, there's never been a real change to the immigration instructions, to the actual calculator. There's always been touch-ups and there's always been overhauls to the instructions. There was last year, October, if I'm not wrong, is when they actually changed the points to 160 points, but the calculator per se was still the same.
Right.
It was again a touch-up that National had done. This is for the first time that we've actually seen the points calculator absolutely change. So everything's new. This is a new calculator. We can no longer use what was there previously to calculate points. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, I mean, we've had clients who come from the UK or from South Africa, from the countries that have comparable labour markets with 20 years plus of experience, but actually have no qualifications, which would be recognized equivalent to New Zealand qualifications. And what we found quite alarming was that they could be on 100k plus jobs, really good jobs, working in decent professions, good portfolios, but they were actually not eligible for residence straight away. And yet you would have someone who would have done a New Zealand qualification at a level 7, would have gone out of Auckland, worked at a dairy, and would have got a residence. So clearly the system was wrong, because
right.
if it wasn't giving residence or wasn't qualifying the actual skills, where the actual skills were to be able to get a residence, the system needed a change. So I actually think that it's a good thing for the New Zealand brand and for our country that we've actually changed the system.
Right.
But I think the way it's changed is...
yeah, sure, that would be an issue. But when you are talking about changing the system, I just want to add a little bit to your perspective, is that the system was never changed, that's you are saying, right? So there is a lot of views out there in public, especially in the mainstream media, that which has been actually used quite well by a lot of political parties as well, that young international students who come into the country do some courses and they immediately get an easy pathway to residency, the point that you touched, right? But that pathway, from my understanding, is not exclusive to New Zealand. It is actually available to many other Anglophonic countries like Australia, Canada, as
absolutely.
well. Plus, what you have touched over here is that that system, was it created by the last government, or was it there even before that, actually?
I think it would probably be even before then, because I remember even prior to Helen Clark days that you did have, like I said, the calculator was never really changed. It was touched upon and was overhauled.
Right.
And when you say international students, this is something that's very close to my heart, because unlike a lot of practitioners who are actually talking about the immigration policies, I was an international student and I've turned out to be pretty good for the country. And I know of many other international students who have come to study and have absolutely done brilliantly for New Zealand. I mean, this is my home. I've got kids here. We're doing businesses. We employ a lot of staff. So I wouldn't think that, I think it's just, we can, a lot of us in the industry can identify why international students have gone into the bad light for the last couple of years, and that has been not a very good move that was made in 2014-15, which was, removing the English language requirement. And if you look around the world, you would see that every year, every few years, there'll be a country that'll take a lot of students in, and then few years when they can no longer service them, they would make things tighter. And it's been around for Canada, it's been around for Australia, New Zealand's probably following the same pathway when we're getting through the channelization.
Yes.
So it is quite interesting to kind of put that perspective on it, but I think international students overall are absolutely beneficial for the country, for its growth, because we within New Zealand cannot grow and service the industries where the employers sit.
Right, and especially with the current state of economy, which is growing, and a lot of employers all over, around Auckland and outside Auckland actually, different industries, they are actually struggling to get employable workforce. So definitely international students bring a lot of value to the country, right?
I think just absolutely, and I think if the government or whoever is making those decisions start looking at the facts rather than what they believe, and from a socialistic point of view, the facts and the researchers, I mean, we've had some chief economists, who are quite famous, and some main speakers who work with the government in doing some research on stats and facts. They've said pretty clearly that there is a very little support that immigration has any negative effects on wage growth or on unemployment. People within the country who are so-called Kiwis, born and brought up in New Zealand, who are not available to work, will not be available to work if there was less immigration. That does not change.
Sure.
So I think that is something that needs to be kept in fact, and the researchers confirm that. So to say that immigration is taking those jobs away because there's more people coming in is actually not that right. And also, it also shows that in the long term, if you have the right kind of skilled people coming in, which we hope that with the changes in the immigration system and the calculator, then it will in the long term bring innovation and the right mix of skills to a country which is needed for that growth,
Right.
which the normal low-lying natives of the country can no longer contribute anyways. So you do need to put the immigration radar in the right direction.
Sure. So there is an agreement that radar might not have been at the right place from the very beginning.
Yeah, I wouldn't
And-
agree with that.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Okay. What we are trying to understand is that why this system is not adequate to allow international students to go into the industries which is very employment hungry, I would say. Like, we need a lot of construction workers. We need around 56,000 construction workers. We need a lot of dairy workers and horticulture workers, right? So why international students are not being, directed in a way that they go on and fulfill those areas of shortage of skilled workers?
I think we all sort of know the answer to that. That is because I think it's a supply-demand situation. But in this case, there is the demand, but there is no supply. Students who come in and want to do carpentry courses and construction courses and courses into civil and plumbing and so on and so forth want to come in for courses, but there are no providers offering those courses for international students. If you look at a plumber, if you look at a student who wants to come in and do plumbing here, now, say for example, there's a provider in South Auckland that offers courses there, but the pathways that they have for international students, because we have to remember that this person needs a visa
Right.
while this person is doing the course. After they finish the course and they get into the ITOs for apprenticeship or start working on apprenticeships with the employees, they still need a visa. Now, the rules are such that the work visas don't support this pathway, nor does the student visa. So once they finish the course, they've literally got no pathway to be able to get through the apprenticeship and then get through the registration and start working. So, and I think that's exactly where the issue is. There needs to be courses, and you need to have pathways for those students and incentives for them to do the course. Like if someone's coming in to do a bachelor's in civil engineering, after doing the 3-year course, they should have more incentive. They should have probably longer job search or whatever it is than someone who's doing a level 5, 6 in business, which is, I wouldn't call it low skill, but comparatively, obviously you see where the demand for the country is, and for them to become successful migrants and get their residence, you can obviously see which person is going to have
Yes,
more scope.
and that is an area actually. So from understanding, correct me if I'm wrong actually, what you're saying is that system is not existing currently under the national government, but that system has never not been proposed by the
No.
Labour as well.
No.
That is the problem.
I don't think that system's ever been there. Like I said, I've been practicing for over 10 years and I've never really seen, I mean, we do a lot of recruitment from countries like India. And I know for sure, I mean, they always keep immigration, you talk to immigration, they say there's no demand. But I actually disagree. There's a lot of people on the ground who want to come here on carpentry courses. Forget about people in India. There's a lot of people who've done business courses here and they still struggle to find jobs, or have done IT courses, or have done whatever other healthcare courses, and they actually want to get into a sensible course. We've got a lot of clients who come to do healthcare courses, but then they eventually become, get into nursing because when they're on shore. So, there are a lot of students who actually want to do carpentry, sensible courses here where they see their pathways. But there is no provision in the immigration pathway structure for these kind of courses, and I think that's probably the biggest downfall.
Yes, because from a student's perspective, I guess they are pretty young at that stage when they make their call. They would be spending anyways $30,000 to $40,000, right? So ideally, they would want to spend, which leads them to a secure future, right? So probably that is a gap which I guess the system is failing to address.
Exactly.
And the problem is that all the parties in this election, they are not addressing that cause, isn't it?
Exactly.
Would you agree with that? Right?
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I'll give you an example. Like, for example, cookery courses. Now, chefs used to be in the long-term skill shortage list, and then the government, I think it was national at that time, they decided to take them out because they realized that you only need to have chefs with so much experience to be in the list. So now the long-term skill shortage list only has chefs with so much experience. But what I'm saying is that you still, that's why there's so much chefs still coming in, because you still have providers who would offer those courses, and then you've got the pathways to get on. You start offering courses that are going to be in line with where the demand and the skills and where the jobs are. I see absolutely no reason why countries like China and India wouldn't produce students where they give thousands of students every year to come into these courses. I think it needs to line up with where the demand and the jobs are.
Right, sure. Now, on that line, actually, National has recently introduced minimum income threshold for getting residency, right? And Labour has said that probably they will be scrapping that, and that's not a best way. So what are your thoughts? What do you think, actually?
I mean, look, I just think that this whole thing's become a big joke, because I think, I don't know I wouldn't comment what's right and what's wrong, because obviously there's governments who are obviously hopefully doing their homework and making these calls and doing some consultation in making these changes. But the problem is that when you make a change for a country, now, where we service from India, we have people coming to us and saying, but Canada's doing this and Australia's doing this. So we are competing with the world. Right. We're not just secluded when we are doing international students. So when you go through something like this, I think it's just a joke for the brand. Right. And I think it's, before any government decides to take any major change, I think it's quite important that we think about the New Zealand brand and how that brand looks, not just here, but outside of here, and how people look at our brand sitting in countries like China, India, wherever, and looking at all these changes. There's so much uncertainty in the market with what's going to happen.
So, what we believe is that the pressure of election is actually precipitating a view that probably international education is not that important. And that's probably they're missing the point, actually. It is a $5 billion worth of industry, right? And that is a brand as well that needs to be protected and preserved as well. And what probably both parties are doing, I would say, probably kind of a scaremongering is over there. Maybe that is the intended goal or not, but that is the effect, isn't it? And that is being reflected in the numbers of the students as well. That is not.
That's right. And I think one thing, if anyone sort of followed the work that I do, one thing that I've said for a long time, that when national government removed the English language requirement in 2014-15, that was probably the biggest can of worms. We all knew what was going to happen after that, and I think what sort of happened is pretty much we expected at that stage when this was removed, because what that did was that actually got a lot of low-level students, who wouldn't qualify to coming into New Zealand, to come into New Zealand and disadvantage those really high-end students who wanted to come here. Like I said, I mean, I am absolutely all for international education and international students. I think they bring to New Zealand something that a native doesn't, and I think New Zealand needs that mix. We need that cultural diversity. I was an international student, so was my husband, so we've been through that journey, and I think that is very important in New Zealand. And I think New Zealand as a whole, as in the people here, are actually very welcoming. But because of things that you hear in the paper with, something's happened, there's an incident. We never used to hear this about 5 years ago. This is only sort of picked up in the last few years, probably because of the kind of audience that we've attracted, because of the rules that we've opened up. I mean, I remember a few years ago, UK had removed all their
But that's the
requirements.
point. That's the point. Sorry to interrupt you, but the point is, okay, the pathway for international students to permanent residency, that is a well acknowledged pathway, and that is the pathway that brings value to the country. That is well acknowledged. But the problem is, what all the parties are doing, they are actually tarnishing that pathway and tarnishing the image. Plus the policies that they're saying is probably they are making it difficult for future international students to come and work, to come and live over here, because they are taking away the 20-hour working right as well, actually. So that will again be a tough call for international students to choose New Zealand as their destination, and it's not going to help New Zealand anyways, isn't it?
No, absolutely not. And like I said, I mean, the research shows pretty clearly that this doesn't affect the local market anyways. It's not like the international students are coming and taking the jobs away. I think that, you know, and in fact, it's just not what we believe. It's the researchers who've confirmed that that's not what's happening. So, and I think that's what people need to understand when they are going ahead and voting, that they need to understand that immigration, New Zealand needs immigration. We're all immigrants. Most of us are, whether we've come from the UK or whether we've come from Europe or India or China. But I think it needs to be skewed in the right direction so that we can attract the right kind of people to come to New Zealand. We do not want it open. And I think one thing that is also quite important is that, yes, we've got a pathway to residence in this country, but everybody who walks in or comes in doesn't mean that they're going to get a residence. There are some parameters that you will need to kind of work through to get your residence. So I think getting that message quite outright and clear is quite important. I mean, if we were to cut out 30,000 something migrants to come into the country, I don't know what that would do to the employment sector down in Southland, where if you go down to Queenstown and go and, you know, sit in one of those restaurants, you will see all migrants serving. You know, I don't know how those businesses would survive. And the same goes for old age centers. You've got all migrants working as caregivers and healthcare assistants and support workers.
So would you be able to comment on that, like how we can make it better to divert the right workforce to the right industry and right
I mean,
regions?
I think it needs to, from a practitioner's point of view, it needs to start from the front end. So first, obviously, having the right kind of courses where the skills are, not necessarily where they would get a residence, but, you know, for example, there's a lot of caregivers come into the country, but they do not get a residence. But yet we need caregivers to stay in this country to look after our aging population. So I think the first thing would be, if you are looking at international students, putting those right courses in the mix out there and putting the right pathways, whether they take them to temporary or eventually to residence.
Right, and selling it rightly in the market like India.
Exactly, and that's going to be a difficult one, because we do not have any control over the legislation that is in India, because agents who are sitting in India and China and all the offshore markets do not have to be licensed. So we cannot control what that agent
Controlling
says.
is another issue, but the thing is, what my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that if there is a pathway existing here, like, you know, you can come into trading course, you can come into trading course or construction industry or a plumber, and that will take you eventually, that will open a way for you that you can at least try and get into the residency thing. If that is available, then
Absolutely.
probably agents will automatically promote those pathways as well. What do you say?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Look, I'll have to probably disagree a little bit, because I think, as most of us know, that India market is, and China as well, is driven largely by the agent network, and the agent network is driven largely by the commission structures they get from providers, and that's why I think NZQ has become really tight on sort of, you know, on all of the providers that we hear is closing. So I think to kind of change their thinking would be quite hard, but yes, if we do open up providers and, you know, courses that these people can get into, then advisors like us and other lawyers who do practice in these countries, there are quite a few who do practice and have offices in these countries, would then be able to put students at least in the right kind of courses, and at least it can begin from here. And obviously the second thing is, which I think National has just done, is to put more incentives into people going out of Auckland.
All right, yeah, that is another issue actually. I think there is 30 more points.
Yeah, there's 30 more points, and I think just as a rule of thumb, if you were to stay in Auckland, then you would need to work somewhere about 4 years in that skilled employment to be able to gain those equivalent 30 points that you probably can gain if you go out of Auckland. So I think giving those incentives to those people to go out of Auckland, and then also making sure that there are jobs out of Auckland, because let alone you telling them go out of Auckland, but if there are no jobs out of Auckland, what in the world are they going to do?
Right. So how will government control that? The thing is that National and Labour, you know, right now, because they have to win elections, so they can say that they will control everything, you know. Labour has said that they will be bringing labours to the region, supporting the construction industry and all that. And same with the National as well. But when you raise the point that there has to be jobs as well, so there is too many things. And don't you think, like, parties, they are promising a lot that rather than they can actually control in the economy?
Yeah, I think this is probably the most debatable, interesting election ever. But I think that's probably driven all by obviously who wants to win. The reality is that, if you are sending people out of Auckland, that there has to be measures within the government to support employers to be able to operate out of Auckland. We deal with some large employers who are sitting outside Auckland, who I don't know, however it works economically, who do need that support, extra support from the government to be able to run their businesses, because their businesses are 100% reliant on migrant workers. And if the migrant workers were no longer able to get their visas, they would be in a lot of trouble. So I think it is a balancing act between, not just sending people, making sure that the people can actually work for the employers, and simultaneously supporting the employers to be able to exist out of Auckland. I don't have the answer of how that's going to work. Obviously, I know immigration not...
No, sure, it's a complex process, as everyone says.
But I think that's what the government needs to think and keep in mind.
The challenge is that when you are in government, you acknowledge that complexity, and when you're in opposition, you always demolish that, saying that, yep, we can have 3-point policies which can actually eradicate. Now, what you have discussed today is that probably you have experience with both in the last 9 years of national government, and probably a few more years in the Labour government as well. And you agree that the challenges and the problem in our immigration system has existed there for a while, between both national and Labour government, and none of the parties have so far gone for a major reforms in the immigration system, making it work in a better way for...
Yeah, I think just on that, that's what I was saying before we started the interview, that this is probably the first time that I've actually seen some government step up and actually change the calculator. Now, I don't think this is there yet, but I think this is for the first time that they've changed something, and I think the system that was existing, that was running, needed a change, because it wasn't bringing the right kind of skills to the country that we live in. So it needed the change, but whether this change is actually an effective change or not, only time will tell, because it's only when we start implementing this.
I think we had a very good, healthy discussion today. Now, before we close, actually, since international students coming from India, they are a big concern for us. So if you have to say, for next few years, what should be their best way to choose New Zealand, and if they are looking for a pathway to residency, what kind of courses? What do you think? Just a couple of lines on that.
That's a very good question, and I think I'll be traveling to India in the next few weeks, and I think one of the things that I've got as my agenda is that it's pretty clear that the new system and the way things are going, it's in two directions. One is we are trying to encourage people to come into sensible courses. So we're trying to encourage them to come into courses where there's demand for jobs. And second is we're trying to encourage people to come for higher end courses, as in postgraduate level courses. So what this means is this calculator now gives more points. So they've increased the age limit. And so what that means is that more mature people who are doing their master's courses can actually now have much more benefit into getting a residence than someone who's doing a low level 4, 5 kind of course. So, clearly coming for those higher end courses, more mature, with skills. That's where the skills are. Someone who's 21 years old would probably not have enough skills, whereas someone who's 31 years old would have had a few years of work experience and bring more skill. So it's probably moving into those higher end. But now it raises an interesting question, because whether those masters people would be able to get the jobs that New Zealand gives to be able to get to residence is an interesting question.
Yeah, to me, I know that we are coming to our time actually, but the thing is, to me, it's again a big wishful thinking, I would say, from New Zealand's perspective, because it sounds very, very amusing to your ears that you need to get higher end courses actually, but your economy should have that kind of absorption as well.
Absolutely.
That they should be able to absorb those kind of things. So that's a balance actually that everyone will have to maintain. But anyways, it was quite an interesting discussion today, Arunima. So yep, thanks for your time today, Arunima. And yeah, we will see in next few days how elections goes, and we can keep our fingers crossed that immigration system is evolving, and it will be good for everyone. Is it right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Indian Weekend, and hopefully people can sort of get some kind of information before they go out and vote to see that immigration is actually a good thing for the country if done the right way.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.